As Enrico said, my name is Andi Britt. I lead IBM's talent and transformation consulting practice here in Europe. And I want to talk about the role that we as HR professionals are going to play in helping our organizations and our people return to, adjust to the new normal. And I'm going to spend about sort of 15 to 20 minutes talking through some slides. But then I'm actually going to invite one of my colleagues, Kim Yeon-Joo from China, to actually share her insights with us. Now, the COVID-19 pandemic has taken away lives and jobs. It's damaged industries and enterprises, and it's turned the unimaginable into the normal, into the usual. And a return to normal, whenever it comes, is going to be a different normal. And the already considerable challenges that face us as HR professionals in a typical work setting, things like leadership or workforce engagement, productivity and skills, have moved into uncharted territory. So I want to explore some priorities for us as HR professionals as we begin to think through how today's experience that we're just getting used to will become a new normal, and what that might mean for some of the strategic and business partnering advice we provide to the business. But can I start by let's looking at the world as it used to be at the start of the year. I mean, January marked the beginning of the third decade of the 21st century. And back then, we were continuing to talk about or develop the theme of disruption. And we were seeing that in the level of business disruption, i.e., barriers to entry swept away by the digital revolution. We were talking about talent disruption, i.e., everyone, all organizations now competing for the same skills. And we talked about experience disruption, the heightened expectation for consumer grade experience in everything that we do, whether that's for our customers or for our employees. And also, many of us talked about a VUCA world. Have you heard that phrase? Volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Now, that's what we used to be talking about. Now, that feels like a lifetime ago, because now the world is looking very different. We're all facing the prospect of a severe economic shock, brought about by the massive disruption to supply and demand in virtually every industry. And we're all about to experience that plunge into that cold water plunge into some form of recession. And I think in that context, then VUCA is going to be VUCA. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean that VUCA itself isn't sufficient to describe what we're going through. The future is accelerated. Within weeks, we all had to shift to a new way of working, faster than we've ever had to deliver a transformation before. It's alarming. Today's employees are having to deal with multi-dimensional anxiety, fears about their health, their family's health, their elderly parents' health, anxiety about their job or their source of income, the additional pressures and workloads associated with childcare and homeschooling, while they're trying to hold down a full-time job. So it's accelerated, it's alarming. It's also a time of grieving. I don't think we fully appreciated how the sudden loss of family or friends who have died and the inability to grieve in the traditional way will impact our employees and how they show up to work. And then finally, it's hazardous. As and when these restrictions are eased, it remains a fact that the workplace and the transport systems to get us there and the cafeteria and the coffee shop that we pop in along the way are all now places where you can contract this deadly virus, for which there is as yet no vaccine. So this really is uncharted territory for us. So before we get into what I think are some recommendations for HR professionals, let's first of all look at the data and let's answer this question. What is top of the mind for our employees? Now, some of this research has been done by IBM, some of it's been done by HR Executive Online, but just look at these stats. 69% of our employees say that this is the most stressful time of their career. 38% of employees say that their employer has helped them learn the skills they need to work in this new way. But the corollary is that the majority think that their employers haven't helped them to learn the skills they need to work in this new normal. Over 50% of employees we surveyed want clear or clearer crisis communication protocols in place, so they get the information they need on tap when you shift to a new way of working. And about 40% of employees want their employer to provide employee opt-in remote working options when returning to normal operations, i.e. they're concerned about the return back to a physical workplace, a working office or factory environment. So this is what our employees are concerned about. So as we start to prepare for the new abnormal and whatever that looks like, I've set out 4 imperatives that I think as HR professionals we're both experiencing now and will become even more relevant when those restrictions are eased. And they are these 4. Well-being of your people. We need to remind the organization that people come first. Working practices. We need to help our organizations reimagine how work gets done. Work policies. We're going to have to rely on data to reconfigure, rewrite our HR and our return to work policies. And finally, workforce planning. We need to help our organizations reassess what critical part HR is going to play in the recovery as we look at the skills and the balance of skills and employees that we need in the new organization. So let's look at these each in turn. Let's start off with well-being of your people. As HR professionals, we've been thrust into the center of this storm, on questions on how do we protect our people, or what health and safety protocols do we need, or whom do we need to put on furlough, or what work from home policies do we need. But given the intense stress and change that people are experiencing, I would argue that our first and foremost role as HR professionals is to surface, if it's not self-evident, that this crisis is personal and experiential. We need to remind business leaders that our people are dealing with intense personal, family, health, and mental well-being issues. And if given the flexibility, trust, and the support, they are resilient and will be able to adapt. And that's why the CHRO needs to become the CEO, the Chief Empathy Officer. We need to introduce empathy and understanding into the COVID-19 war room. Your employees will remember how you treat them when under pressure and how you listen to their concerns. One HR leader put it really well. They put it like this: COVID-19 is the critical moment when your company culture is revealed. It's the critical moment when your company culture is revealed. Well, look, as an example, this is an IBM work from home pledge. It's how leaders at IBM are trying to build trust, flexibility and resilience into our workforce, which has largely shifted to working from home. And it recognizes that rather than applying a standard mandate to remote working, a set of defined mandated policies, it's better to empower individual employees and give them the space and freedom to adapt and to learn what is the best working style for them. Notice that each of these statements has been worded as a means of empowerment, not as a control mechanism or as a policy mandate. I pledge to be family first. I pledge to support flexibility. I pledge to support not camera ready times. I pledge to be kind. That's the kind of policy that HR professionals we can introduce so that the well-being of our people comes first. Let's look at the second one, working practices. So reimagining how work gets done. When the COVID-19 lockdown began, much of our focus was initially on business continuity. HR leaders around the globe had to work out quickly how to sustain communication, collaboration, competence, and culture in this new virtual operating model. Now I think HR leaders need to step back and help the business assess where and how work could be reimagined, redesigned, or resourced differently in this new distributed or remote working model. And our research shows that while 3/4 of executives say they are currently helping their employees learn to work in new ways, as I showed you previously, only just over 1/3 of surveyed employees said the same. That is a big gap between what leaders think they're doing in helping their workers work remotely and what employees feel at the coalface. And that's a gap that HR need to help fill. Well, how do we do this? Well, a number of ways. Let's seek out those best practices in our organizations where teams are able to make fast online decisions, and let's learn from them. We need to discover examples of where teams are being productive, whether that's in creative design or customer service or product development, and we need to replicate that across the company. We need to find and seek out examples where leaders are using online tools effectively, whether that's tools like Microsoft Teams, Slack, WebEx, Mural, Zoom. And where not, give those leaders and managers some coaching. Get some video tutorials recorded. Let's put reverse mentoring in place. And now that most of our leaders have mastered at least how to switch the camera on and their mute button off, let's show those same leaders and managers how they can use the chat functionality to its full effect, or to set up a poll or a survey in WebEx, or how to use the whiteboarding capability in Mural to dial up the level of engagement and idea sharing. So let's reimagine how work gets done, and let's help the organization get used to this new way of working. Thirdly, let's look at work policies, and let's rely on data to reconfigure our HR and return to work policies. Eventually, we have to recognize that some of us will return to work, but some employees will never go back to physical, co-located working. For some, the shift could be permanent. Now, there's no playbook on this. We've not really had to set out policies on remote working expectations and flexible working arrangements, which take account of our employees' mental health and family obligations. We haven't had to do that before. We've never had to write health and safety policies for social distancing at work or scheduled times when you can come into the workplace. So we will need to build this from scratch as we revisit our company policies that cover remote and distributed work. We'll have to rethink specific guidance that allows for personal circumstances. Who knows? We may even have to sacrifice the golden HR calf of equality and fairness and recognize that the working pattern offered to a single working parent who has to homeschool their kids might be different from that of a new grad or a baby boomer executive. And we'll need to articulate a clear vision of how our culture and management systems are going to evolve in this remote working future. By the same token, we've never had to give such immediate and constantly evolving advice and information to our employees. Sometimes it changes on a daily basis. So we're going to have to put in place effective digital channels and information services that provide employees with 24/7 information and the latest guidance on what our return to work policies are. Virtual assistants and AI-powered chatbots, I think, are going to play a key part here. And we're going to need to adopt a new style of communication, one which addresses the known and the unknown. Being honest about uncertainty and ambiguity in the current climate will help instill calm among employees and keep them productive. Now, to do this all effectively, we're going to have to rely on data to guide us, not just access to the government advice on movement and travel, but importantly, data on how employees see and how they feel about the future. Feedback loops, whether through polls or questionnaires or sentiment analysis, are going to be critical to ensure that we're listening to the views of our people. And it perhaps goes without saying that the health and safety environment is going to differ from country to country, location to location, when these restrictions are eased or when it's safe to use the local transport systems. So there may be no global standard return to work policy. Instead, you'll need to guide and empower your local country HR leadership teams to assess the risk associated with the return to work and put in place an appropriate strategy. Fourthly, workforce planning, reassessing what critical part HR needs to play in recovery. Now, apart from the obvious health and safety protocols that HR will need to develop as a precursor to the return to work, the next key challenge will be helping with the vital task of business recovery. And we need to be realistic that some parts of our business may not fully recover. So our professional HR skills will be of critical value, particularly in the area of workforce planning. So helping the business assess what type and volume of skills, what type and volume of roles the company is going to need going forward. Reallocating staff or retraining staff if they if they need to move into new areas. Helping our staff take seriously their own skills development that's best going to prepare them for a reshaped business and a new economic environment, which in many economies is going to involve a downturn in business. And then, of course, advising our leaders and liaising with works councils on the sensitive but critical area of redundancies and layoffs. Workforce planning or skills and capacity planning, therefore, is going to be fundamental. So it's worth getting your arms around the data that you have today so that you can begin that critical work on modeling and forecasting. It's going to be so essential. Now, although there is no playbook for how HR responds to these challenges, we can also learn from others who've gone ahead of us. And in the last few weeks, China, which was the first to go into lockdown, has become one of the first countries to emerge. Last Friday, I was able to interview YeonJoo Kim, my colleague, who runs IBM's talent and transformation practice in Shanghai, China, to ask her what Chinese firms were learning about the return to work. And notice that she starts with a personal reflection. In the West, we are very interested, particularly in the HR community, to understand what the future is going to look like in a post-COVID-19 world. And I wonder if you could start to share with us some of the insights that you are seeing in Chinese companies as they return to work post the pandemic. I wonder, could you start off by telling us what physically is the return to looking like for Chinese companies?
Sure, Andy. I should say first is this week is a really fantastic week for me since finally my son goes back to his school after 3.5 full months of homeschooling. So many of you can imagine if you have a child at home for that long period of time, how happy parents are about this returning back to school. Yes, absolutely fantastic thing. But actually, before the kids, people already began to go back to office here in China. So of course, office doesn't look same as we used to know. Social distancing is continued even after we go back to office. And you need to wear the face mask in the office if you're sitting in open area. So very interestingly, we still prefer the video conference in the office with someone sitting in right next room, because otherwise we have to wear the face mask during the meeting. So welcome to new normal office life.
Wow, that's very interesting. And presumably that means that most offices can't take the capacity of workers that they used to accommodate previously. How much of a reduction do you think Chinese companies are seeing in the actual capacity of people that can go into an office or a factory environment?
So that actually happens almost at least at half. So they either take turns, the half of employees coming in the morning, half coming in the afternoon, or the Monday and Tuesday. So it is that social distancing is very strictly applied in Chinese company, even these 3 or 4 months after the pandemic.
Okay. Now we know that organizations are planning to be very adaptable as they return to work, and this has significant impact on the roles and skills of employees. What are you seeing happening in China?
So the last 3 months during COVID-19 outbreak was very difficult and different experiences we had in China. So for example, one of the shoe making company manufacturers, they tried to resume their factory, of course, after all this disinfection. But many of their employees went to their hometown because it was during holiday season in China, and they were locked down there. So couldn't come back to work because of these travel restrictions. So company tried to hire temporary workers in the region, as well as to reskill back office employees to help factory productions. Result was hiring was not very effective nor successful, while very interestingly, reskilling and reassigning employees were somewhat successful. And the other story was about the online supermarket company. So as you can imagine, they had to deal with the explosive demand increase during COVID-19 in the beginning, where they couldn't really increase enough employees in their warehouse or for delivery services in that short period of time. So they collaborated with other small and medium local services company in the region to borrow the temporary workers, educate very quickly, and which helped both sides of companies. Meanwhile, another cosmetic company, they had to shut down 40% of their stores during COVID-19, which was the end of January during the Spring Festival holiday, which is the mega season for any retailers. Of course, they lost 90% of their sales during that period of time. But they instantly shifted their store to a major online commerce platform, and they trained all their store sales agents to start counseling with the customers through mobile messengers in this online commerce platform. And what they did, only 2 weeks later during Valentine's Day, sales revenue per one agent went up to 4 times higher than their operations normally in the store. So it's magnificent. These kind of experiences we had in China past 3 months made a very different experiences to us. So now, as we said, we are going back to offices, we are going back to our work, but you can imagine the economy and the business environment is still very uncertain and even volatile and very complex. Many companies still suffer from significant sales drop from domestic and absolutely from the international businesses. They expect this will continue for the time being, which leads inevitably restructuring or redesigning of their business model or even business platform. So along with that, the flexibility and the agility of the business operation becomes very crucial to many companies just in order to survive through this, the uncertain life. So HR is what we are asked to do. So HR has a huge burden now because we are asked to make our organizations and even people very resilient and future-proof. So this is not really just reducing the number of people. It is about the main agenda become how quickly we can reskill our people and how flexible we can reassign our employees in new jobs. So this will lead HR to take more serious attention on continuous employee development program, as well as running flexible organizational structure. So that's the finding we had.
Wow, that's so fascinating. And again, how do you think HR departments are coping with this change and having to reskill and to redesign their organizations? How are HR functions coping in China?
So that's somehow very much interlinked with this digitalization of HR. So the China was actually one of the most advanced country in terms of the mobile and the digital life. For example, like a mobile payment in China is about 60 billion transactions per year for $41 trillion value. So it's already huge in China. But when we come back to our life in the company, especially in the employee services and then HR perspective, digital workplace platform still in China was not very much advanced. But during COVID-19, the first thing they found was, okay, we don't have the platform to work on. So this is nothing about nice to have, it's about the business continuity. They found all the process were manual, the training was all offline, the process, all the human intervention. So what leaders also found is they were very good at the teaching people or the directing people in front of them in the offices, but the senior leaders never knew how to communicate with their team through online, or how to even give the work assignment to their team through online. So it was truly the moment of the truth. The companies found, okay, we're not ready. So of course, in the beginning, we were all very hurried purchasing the online collaboration platform. It became like 10-15 times of the more usages, of course, because everybody had to shift to the online platform. But that's only the beginning. Think about that we've been here about 3 months, that online platform. People started to use, very used to live and work on the online platform. And then they started to push HR, okay, I found this is not effective. We found the process not supporting us. We want to train the team through online channel, digital channel, but we're not really ready to do that. We don't know how to do this effectively. So now it's 3 months later. By the time we are really getting used to this digital life, now we are going back to offices. But as I told in the beginning, even if we are in the offices, we're still living in the life of the digital, and travel across the cities, of course, is still somewhat limited. So people, especially the leaders and also the employees, they are actually challenging HR. Okay, now we are here, but we experience something very nice and then very important, which is critical for us to change ourselves. So give me the answer. How to work effectively on our digital workplaces, how to train, how to communicate, how to serve our employees better. And suddenly it becomes the main job of the HR. So how to deal with that is HR so far was more about the providing the efficiencies, effective services, doesn't matter the channel. But now our major agenda is how to serve, how to work on digital workplaces. So it became the real agenda of the HR. So we talked about a lot of the digital transformation of the company past 2-3 years probably. But I have to say this is more about making work better on digitalized environment. It's not the transformation. The environment is already digitalized. The matter what matters for us is how we really make this happening more effectively, actually.
Well, it's fascinating to hear you talk about a forced and an accelerated transformation that's driving benefits across the organization. Well, look, I suppose one final question about the advice that you give to HR directors, HR leaders over in the West. Now, at this point in history, we can genuinely say that you, China, YeonJoo, you are our future. You are experiencing what our future is going to be. So from that vantage point of 3 or 4 months ahead of us, what advice would you give to HR leaders, CHROs, HR leadership teams as we start to prepare to come out of this pandemic period?
So it was like the 3 months before when we started to experience these pandemics, we didn't know how long this would happen. So in China, because we were the first country, so while we were very busy dealing with all this, the crisis, all this about health and safety, the only problem I remember 2-3 weeks later, we started to talk about what if this continue longer time without really knowing how long this is going to happen. And then we started to come, the executives and the HRs are coming here, shouldn't we prepare something for longer term? Not only dealing with this. Yes, it is very emergent situations. Employee health and safety continuity it's the most important thing. But maybe we have to prepare for the longer term. So why we, of course, we didn't want that. Actually, we didn't like to prepare that long term with these situations. Nobody really liked that idea, but it was just a what if. But as you can see, 3 months later, that what if actually happened. So it is a longer term thing. So I know the Western countries right now are still in the middle of this pandemic situations. HR is the busiest actually function in the organization to deal with all this crisis. But what I can tell is the 3 months later, we are here. And then what we are seeing is we're not really getting out of this first. So be more aggressive about the thinking that learn from the future, which is already happening in China or some other Asian countries. What we are seeing is digital acceleration is the only answer you can survive for next few years. That's what we are seeing here in China, or many of our HR executives in China. Right after they just came out here, they are the one are actually challenging more. Most of the sales channel, the marketing, they somehow already prepared for that. So they were able to deal with their customer interactions, client services, slightly better within a short period of time, because they prepared the past 3-4 years to deal with this digital life. But CHRO or HR executives, unfortunately, were relatively late in terms of the preparation of this. So we are actually very busy and very hurried. So keeping up, because we got now the full force, full pledge of the support from the top, and also the great pressure from the employees. HR executives, be ready about that. Expect all the pressures coming soon, very soon. So while we are busy now, it is important. What are the key challenges we are currently going through there? What was the actual pain when we run on digitals? That will be the one we have to fix as soon as possible. We come back to relatively safer new normal.
Wow, YeonJoo, that's so helpful. Thank you for those messages. Think long term, think digital, think employee engagement. And how wonderful that we get to share from your insights and wisdoms 3 months on. So thank you very much for taking the time with us. I'm sure we'll continue the dialogue as we hear how your journey progresses, so that we can prepare even better for that uncertain future that awaits us. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you. Stay safe. Be healthy.
Thank you, YeonJoo.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Look, I mean, I took a couple of things away from YeonJoo's presentation that I just want to kind of share with you before I kind of close. One was just her reminding us actually how different, how uncertain, how unfamiliar the physical work environment is going to be, with people self-distancing, wearing face masks. It's a very different environment. Secondly, leaders need guidance on how to lead online. It doesn't come natural to many leaders. Thirdly, this is a forced digital transformation. If you weren't digital before, you will be now. And then fourthly, a great encouragement, think long term. The way the future is going to be is very different from the way it used to be. So think about how you start to prepare your workplaces and your workforces for this new abnormal. So a couple of areas, perhaps as we close, and we can open up to some questions. I'll ask Enrique to kind of chair any questions that you might have. But a couple of further areas to help you with your thinking. Firstly, IBM is running its big online virtual conference, Think, this week. And in fact, on Wednesday of this week, on May the 6th, at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, Diane Gearson, our CHRO, is going to be talking about how you empower your workforce in a period of lockdown and remote working. Some of the research that I've been referring to is covered in this COVID response white paper, Beyond the Great Lockdown, Emerging Stronger to a Different Normal. So please refer to that, and that you can get copies of that on our Institute of Business Value website. And then we've got a couple of seminars and webinars that you can access where you can join IBM experts to get their insights on how you build skills and how you rebalance your workforce in this time of massive change. So there's a number of resources that are available free to you if you are interested in finding out more. But Enrico, have there been any questions or comments online?
Yes, I'm back. Let me just go to the questions that we have. Well, the first thing, of course, is about, all the people, participating in our workshop right now, being thankful for to hear from the, firsthand experience on the ground in China, and especially being the first country with the coronavirus hit and now being way ahead of the curve. And like you said before, Andy, sort of representing the future that we could potentially expect going forward. One question that came up was about how, IBM being such a large company, and I think it's something like 97% of our workforce is teleworking now or working from home, but it was not that big of a number before. So the question is, I think the question that I read, which is in the chat, was about how you adapted so quickly from the way you were operating before to this new model where, basically you can literally say that 100% of your company right now is still working. So what did you have in place before to make that happen so quickly? And what have you done throughout the process to make it work, effectively for the organization?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Enrique. So look, first of all, I think we had all the technology and the telephony in place. So it was fairly easy for us to encourage all of our employees to work from home. In fact, many of our employees at IBM are designated as mobile or remote workers. So it's in our DNA. It's in our culture. Secondly, I think we are used to remote working practices. So we're used to running meetings online, but more than that, we're used to running virtual workshops. We're used to, doing online brainstorming and product development and software development. And so I think that's kind of we're just used to it. And that's the way they work. And then secondly, we do give our employees great freedom. So I talked about that flexible working pledge. We do place a lot of trust on our employees to work out what's the best working arrangement for them. And so in one sense, we're a values-based organization rather than a rules and controls-based organization. So we give our employees a bit of freedom to make it work for them. So if you've got to homeschool your kids in the morning, that's fine. You can take the morning off because you know you're going to put the hours in the evening. So we trust our employees to get it right.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. And of course, you've been through a journey that did not start the day before coronavirus hit. I mean, you've been in this journey of not only digital transformation, but also cultural transformation for quite a long time. But I imagine, like it happens with many other organizations, that what we see right now in IBM is the end product of a journey, and it's not the end. It continues to evolve, right? But I'm guessing that at some point at the very beginning of this journey, there were some hesitation maybe for some leaders to say, well, sending my people to work from home, I don't know if I feel comfortable with that. Maybe they didn't say out loud, that it was a lack of trust rather than a lack of infrastructure of technology. So what's your message from the IBM learning of so many years doing digital transformation outwardly, but also, inward in the company? What's your message for those organizations that are still leading with lack of trust, or weak leadership when it comes to preparing their organizations for this new way of work, which will probably continue into the future, whatever that however that long last or whatever. So what's your message in that sense?
Yeah, and it's a really good question. I think you pinpointed it. At the heart of this is trust. Do you trust your employees to do the best thing that they can? Do you trust them to adapt and to be resilient? Now, the way that I think you can build up that trust is to actually listen to your employees. So something I mentioned in my presentation is open up the channels where you get feedback from your employees, how they're finding it, what they're struggling with, where they need help. Now, at IBM, we didn't get this right from start. You think, if anything, we did so much communication that our employees said, look, we've got too much communication coming down at various levels of the organization. Can we try and simplify it? And rather than having lots and lots of communications and open calls, let's try and focus it on the really important communication that we need, and allow employees to opt in. So when we had virtual lunch or virtual group sessions or virtual town halls, allow employees to decide whether they want to come or whether actually they're Zoomed out, they're WebExed out for the day. So we gave our people guidance, but we gave them flexibility. And the way to get through this is to listen to your employees. Make sure that all of your feedback loop, two-way communication channels are open throughout. And that's the way you'll learn your way through this crisis as an organization.
I love that, because very often, IBM is a massive company, in terms of, number of employees and resources to do different things. And you always hear sort of the quintessential excuse not to do something, which is like, of course, IBM can do it because they have all the money, but, we are just like, 100 employees. How are we going to do that? And you just mentioned something that is going back to the basics. It is listening. It is, not getting it perfect at the beginning, but just like iterating and going through that process. It is providing, which I think is one of the most important things that I have been sharing with our community, which is providing the flexibility that you need to provide. You have like you have the basic infrastructure in place, but you provide the flexibility to move around, within that infrastructure that you are providing. So all of these things are doable by the IBMs of the world, but also the the mom and dad pop shops on the corner of your building. So so what's your perhaps your advice for companies that are either small or maybe they are not that small, but they are starting this journey right now?
Yeah. So the first thing is just to reassure them, because, no one has written this playbook before. So each organization is going to have to learn as you go. And that's why I stress it's quite important that, you will have to use data to make some decisions. And while you've got to move quickly in this current environment, it's also fair to say that, as with most agile development, you can iterate as you go, which means you can test things out. You can try things out, even if you know that it may not be the optimum answer. Just try things, do things quickly. In IBM, we often say that everything we do is in a permanent state of beta. It's not the finished product, it's just the next evolution of it. So that gives us courage to try things and to do things quickly. And if they work, we scale them. If they don't, we ditch them and we try something new. So my encouragement to people is do things quickly, iterate, test, get some feedback. If it works, then you can scale it. It's about rapid experimentation, rapid iteration, and learn as you go.
Love it. And did you have a couple of minutes for a couple of other questions?
I do. Yep.
Awesome. And the one question that I wanted to ask you is, we know, I think for a fact, which it's kind of a fact that gets broken all the time, that is larger organizations are more rigid, and because of their structure they move slower, and smaller organizations are more agile, and they have more of self-organized teams and whatnot. So it seems sort of like intuitive that it's easier for smaller organizations to go through that process of iteration and saying, we're going to try this one thing. We don't have a playbook, so we're going to try this one thing, and if it works, we improve, scale, and if it doesn't work, we learn and ditch. So how do you do that in a company of the size of IBM? How do you embrace such a culture of experimentation, at the scale in which you operate?
Yeah, and again, that's a good question. I think it's partly to do with our culture, and it's partly to do with our methods and tools. Let's start off with culture. We measure all of our employees on their level of innovation. One of our key values at IBM is innovation that matters. So in our DNA is that sense, look, we want to be trying new things. We want to be experimenting. We want to be coming up with new ideas. And to do that, we have a very diverse workforce. So diversity in all aspects is critical. So that's part of our culture, diverse and innovation and new ideas. But also we have methods to as well. I mentioned agile, which is fundamental to everything we do, and that drives speed of iteration. But we also have the IBM garage. The IBM garage is where we get experts in, we pile them into a room to rapidly iterate on an idea or a minimal viable product. And because we bring all the people together and we empower them to make a decision, we empower people as teams to actually go through the process from end to finish, we can build things really, really quickly. And because we are able to assemble people virtually or physically to come up with new product development or new software, we make sure that we go fast. And if we empower people, we get the right people in the room, the right decision makers, then we can do things. And that's how you work fast as a large organization. So it's experimentation, at the speed of a startup.
That's fascinating, and I want to connect that with one of the questions that were posted on the chat, and it is, how can you use that model to sort of influence leaders that may not just be corporate leaders, maybe even business leaders and political leaders? How do you use that model of bottom-up approach to influence decisions and make things happen in a different way?
Well, as part of IBM's culture change journey over the last 5 years, we insisted on putting all of our senior leaders through agile training and through design thinking training. We thought, let's start at the top. Let's introduce them both to the method and the language that underpins agile and design thinking. And if we start at the top, it's so much easier to kind of filter it down through the organization. So again, if you want to influence business leaders or political leaders, then sometimes you actually need to get them together and say, let's give you this new skill. Let's educate you in the way that you can do things fast. And I think actually this COVID crisis has probably taught all of us the value and speed of doing things quickly. And that sometimes means the ability to work with imperfect information or with uncertainty or with ambiguity. So it's creating an environment where people can do that and you support them in their journey and encouraging them too that they can make mistakes. So start at the top, get them into a workshop, virtual or physical, and talk them through a process.
That's fascinating, and I love the fact that you do it all beginning with the human, right? With the listening, and you give people permission to know that if they make mistakes while in the process to create some innovation that matters, that is forgivable. What is not forgivable is to sit down and do nothing or do the same thing every day, missing the opportunities for innovation. I love that, and I talk a lot about that. And I love that there's a real example of a large organization that can do it, like IBM. And if you can do it, why can a smaller organization do it? If they have more, seemingly more capacity to change things overnight, because, well, they have the size to do that. So Andi, my last question for you is, I don't like to oversimplify stuff, but I'm going to ask you a question that seemingly will oversimplify some things. If you were to design a 3-step playbook for organizations right now to sort of to begin the process of redesigning their business model, the way they operate, the way they HR, the way they are kind of operating as a company, what those 3 things would be, not only to survive COVID-19, but post-COVID-19. So I know we're oversimplifying the complexity that goes behind redesigning organizations and functions, but I just want to give people 3 little things that they can start doing right at this very second in whatever role they have in their organization.
Yeah, no, it's a good challenge. Well, these would be my 3. The first one is listen to your customer or listen to your client. I mean, the world has changed overnight. So now is a good time to work out what it is that the client or customers that you are serving, what it is that they really need. So start with the customer. Secondly, I'd also then say, listen to your people. Because actually in this environment where there is no playbook, actually, why don't you tap into the collective intelligence of your workforce and ask your people on the ground and say, look, what do you think? How should we get out of this crisis? Don't think that you can solve the problem in the boardroom. Tap into the collective insights and wisdom of your people who are serving your clients. And then the third thing is go fast. Speed is the new business competence. You know, as an organization, you may have great brands, you may have great products, you may have great distribution networks, but I think in the current environment, you've just got to be good at doing things really, really quickly. So be prepared. Once you understand what your customers need and understand how your employees can help you deliver that, then go really, really fast.
Love it. Love them all. Particularly, I actually love them all. I just can't say that I love one more than the other. I just wanted to, you know, as a final thought from my end, I just wanted to sort of reiterate how important it is to tap on the collective power and the collective intelligence of untapped talent sometimes, right? And one of the things that it makes me think, and one of the things that I have been saying ever since this crisis started, is that one of the ways to be able to do that is to show yourself, especially if you're a leader, to show yourself in the most human way, saying, I don't have the answers to the questions that everybody's asking right now. We're all going through some level of suffering, some level of pain. The uncertainty is the same for everybody. I may have more visibility, more resources, but I don't have the answers to the questions. And if we are to survive as an organization, we are going to have to say we don't know what the answer is and get all together to try to find what that answer is and what it looks like. And I think that's so important, is tapping into the power of the people. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Great. Thank you very much, Enrique. Great to talk with you this afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you.